Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. There's always another story coming. My name is Graham Whitfield, and I am 63 years old. I have spent the better part of 4 decades in the same town, the same house on the same street in Tauranga, doing the same kind of work that does not make for interesting dinner conversation. I manage commercial property. Not glamorous. Not the sort of thing that turns heads at a gathering. I buy older buildings. I fix what needs fixing. I lease them to good tenants. And I watch the numbers grow quietly in the background, while the rest of the world chases something louder. My late wife, Margaret, used to say I was the most boring, exciting person she had ever met. I never quite understood what she meant until the year she passed, when I found myself sitting in an empty house that was worth considerably more than anyone around me seemed to realize, feeling absolutely nothing like the man the world thought they saw. That was 8 years ago. This story begins on a Saturday evening in March, about 3 years back, when my nephew telephoned and asked whether I would come to his engagement party. His name is Daniel. He is my younger sister Patricia's boy, tall, good-natured, works in logistics in Hamilton, and has a laugh that fills whatever room he is standing in. I am fond of him. When he asked, I said yes without hesitating, the way you do when the person asking is someone you genuinely want to celebrate. The party was at a function room attached to a vineyard, about 40 minutes south of the city. One of those places with polished concrete floors and long wooden tables and fairy lights strung from exposed beams. The kind of venue that photographs well and costs more than it should. Daniel's future in-laws had organized the whole thing. Her family had money. The visible kind, the kind that announces itself. And from the moment I arrived and saw the catering staff in matching black shirts and the $200 bottles of Central Otago Pinot lining the table, I understood that this evening was as much a statement as it was a celebration. I came alone. I wore a clean navy jacket, trousers that fit well enough, and shoes I had not polished in longer than I should admit. I am not a man who dresses to impress. I never have been. Margaret used to lay out my things for me on important evenings. And without her there to do it, I tend to look like exactly what I am, a retired tradesman who got lucky with property and never bothered to update his wardrobe to match. I arrived a few minutes after 7. I found Daniel near the bar, his face lit up the way a young man's face should be on the night he announces to the world that he has found his person. I shook his hand and held it for a moment longer than a handshake requires. He introduced me to his fiancée, a woman named Chloe, who had kind eyes and a firm handshake, and looked at him the way I remember looking at Margaret when we were young, and had no idea what was coming. I liked her immediately. I found a seat near the edge of things, poured myself a glass of water, and settled in the way I settle in at every social occasion quietly, observing, in no particular hurry to be noticed. That was when I first saw the man I will call Stuart Vane. He was Chloe's uncle, late 50s, broad through the shoulders, with a watch on his wrist that cost more than most people's first car, and the particular ease of a man who has never once in his life worried about the bill. He moved through the room the way certain people do when they have decided, at some point in their lives, that every room they enter is a room that has been waiting for them. I noticed him the way you notice weather coming in off the harbor. You do not always know why your attention shifts. You just know something is about to change in the air. He came to my end of the table, perhaps 40 minutes into the evening, pulling out a chair across from me with the casual authority of someone who does not ask permission before sitting. "Stuart," he said, extending his hand. "Graham," I said, and shook it. He had one of those handshakes that is designed to inform you of something. I have known enough men like him to understand the message without needing it translated. We made the kind of small talk that occurs at these events, the happy couple, the drive down, the quality of the wine. He asked what I did. I told him property. He nodded in the way people nod when they are waiting for you to finish, so they can speak again. Residential? He asked. Commercial, mostly, I said. Another nod. Smaller this time. The kind that files information under not relevant. He told me what he did. Import and distribution high-end kitchen equipment, commercial grade. The sort of thing that goes into restaurants and hotels. He had been doing it for 26 years, had warehouses in Auckland and Christchurch, supplied half the top-tier hospitality businesses in the country. He told me the turnover figure without being asked. I noticed he said it quietly, the way people say things quietly when they want to make sure you hear them clearly. I said it sounded like solid work. He looked at me for a moment, with an expression I have seen before, the expression of a man recalibrating. When the person across the table does not react to your turnover figure the way you expected, you either assume they did not hear you or you assume they are not worth your time. Stuart Vane, I could tell, had decided on the latter. He turned his attention down the table after that. The evening moved forward. Speeches were made. Daniel stood up and said something about Chloe that made two of the women near me reach for their napkins. Chloe's father told a story about the first time Daniel had come to dinner at their house and knocked an entire jug of gravy into his own lap and carried on eating as though nothing had happened. People laughed. It was a good evening, the kind of evening that reminds you what the good parts of being alive feel like. I was standing near the edge of the room after the speeches, holding a glass of the Pinot and watching the younger people find each other on the small dance floor, when Stuart Vane appeared beside me again. He had been talking to a group of men in the center of the room, business associates of Chloe's father, from what I gathered, and there was a different quality to him now. Looser, more certain of his position in the room's hierarchy. He looked at me, then at the glass in my hand, and said, "What was it you said you did? Property?" "That's right," I said. "Investment properties? Buy to rent? That sort of thing?" "Some of that," I said. "More commercial. Office buildings, light industrial. A few mixed-use developments over the years." He made a sound that was almost, but not quite, a laugh. "One-man band kind of thing?" I looked at him. "Something like that," I said. "Good on you," he said, in a tone that means the opposite of what the words say. "Keeps you busy in retirement, I suppose." I took a sip of my wine. It was excellent wine. I decided the wine deserved my attention more than his comment did. "You should get yourself into the commercial game properly," he said. "The real money is in scale. You'd need capital, obviously. Contacts. Takes years to build up the kind of relationships that make things move." He paused. "No offense, none taken," I said. He clapped me once on the shoulder, the kind of clap that is a dismissal dressed up as warmth, and moved back toward the center of the room. I stood where I was for a moment. I finished my wine. I thought about what Margaret would have said. She would have raised one eyebrow and said something that sounded polite and meant something considerably sharper. And then she would have changed the subject to something more interesting. I set my glass down and went to find Daniel. I did not mention Stuart Vane for the rest of the evening. I stayed until 10, said my goodbyes properly, told Daniel and Chloe that I was happy for them in a way I meant completely, and drove home on the dark highway with the radio on and the windows cracked just enough to feel the autumn air. I did not think about Stuart Vane again for several weeks. What happened next was not something I planned. I want to be clear about that. I am not a man who nurses grievances. I do not lie awake, replaying slights. Life is far too short and, frankly, I have seen enough of it to know that the people who spend their energy on resentment are usually the ones who end up with nothing worth keeping. But sometimes the world arranges things in ways that are difficult to ignore. 6 weeks after Daniel's engagement party, I received a call from my commercial agent, a woman named Rachel, who had worked with me for 11 years and knew my portfolio better than I knew it myself. She had been contacted by a company looking to lease a substantial space, a large format building I owned in an industrial area on the eastern edge of Tauranga, 1,500 square meters, solid construction, good road access. The kind of space that does not come available often and, when it does, tends to attract serious interest. The company looking to lease it was a North Island distribution operation looking to expand their logistics presence. The company was Stuart Vane's. Rachel sent me the enquiry. I read it. I sat with it for a moment. Then I asked Rachel to arrange a viewing and said nothing else. I did not attend the first viewing myself. I let Rachel handle it. She is professional, thorough, and does not waste words. She took the prospective tenant's representative through the property, a man in his mid-30s named Brendan, who was clearly senior in Stuart's operation, and reported back that they were very interested. The location suited their distribution requirements exactly. They had been looking for 6 months without finding anything comparable. They wanted to move quickly. I authorized Rachel to proceed with the standard process. References, financial statements, the usual. I also asked her to arrange a second viewing, this time with the principal, with Stuart Vane himself. She confirmed the appointment for a Thursday afternoon in late May. I arrived before he did. I was standing near the roller doors at the rear of the building when the car pulled in a late-model Range Rover. Dark green, the kind of car that says I have made certain decisions about how I want to be perceived. I watched him step out. He was dressed well, the way he had been at the party. He spoke to Brendan briefly, then looked up at the building with the expression of a man who had already decided what he wanted and was now simply confirming it. Rachel met him at the entrance. I waited. He came through the building with the easy confidence of someone who was accustomed to being the most important person in a transaction. He asked good questions. He knew his square meterage requirements, his clearance heights, his loading dock specifications. He was, whatever else he was, not a fool about his own business. Rachel guided him toward the back where I was standing. He saw me when he was about 10 meters away. I watched the recognition move across his face, the slight narrowing, the recalibration, the same filing system working in real time. "Graham," he said, stopping. "Stuart," I said. "Good to see you again." A pause. "You're the owner," I said. "Yes." He looked at the building, then at me, then at the building again. I could see him doing the arithmetic. A building this size in this location, I knew, was sitting on land I had purchased 17 years ago for a figure that seemed ordinary at the time and would raise eyebrows now. The building itself I had developed 8 years back. The whole thing, at current market value, was worth just under $4 million. And this was one of 7 commercial properties I held in the Bay of Plenty alone. "Rachel tells me your operation has been looking for 6 months, I said. "That's right," he said. His voice had changed. Not dramatically. "But I have been doing this long enough to hear the shift." "It's a good building," I said. "I'm proud of it. Built it to spec, no corners cut. The previous tenants were in here 9 years without a single structural complaint." He nodded. He was looking at me differently now. I recognized that look too. It is the look of a man who has made an error in judgment and is trying to work out whether the other person noticed. I let the silence sit for a moment. I am comfortable with silence in a way that tends to unsettle people who are not. Then I said, "Walk with me." We walked the length of the building together while Rachel handled Brendan at the other end. Stuart was quieter than he had been at the party, listening more, asking questions that had a different quality to them, the questions of someone trying to understand who they were dealing with rather than establish their own position. I showed him the 3-phase power setup, the drainage, the recently upgraded roller doors. I mentioned in passing, without emphasis, that I had 3 other similar properties currently tenanted and had just completed settlement on a site in Rotorua that I was developing for a national cold storage operator. I mentioned it the way you mention something that is simply true, the way the weather is simply what it is. He was silent for a moment. "You've been busy," he said. "I've been consistent," I said. "There's a difference." He looked at me then, with something I had not seen from him at the party. Something closer to respect, the kind of respect that arrives late and lands a little awkwardly, the way it always does when it should have been there from the beginning. We stood near the rear entrance while the late afternoon light came through the high clerestory windows in long pale lines across the concrete floor. "The lease terms," he said. Rachel mentioned 5 years. "That's what I'm looking for," I said. "I don't like short tenure in a building this size. It's disruptive for everyone." He nodded slowly. "The rental figure is what it is," I said. Rachel has the full breakdown. It reflects the market and the quality of the asset. "I don't negotiate on buildings I'm confident in." Another pause. Longer this time. "I owe you an apology," he said. I looked at him. "At the party," he said. I made assumptions. About what you did. About where you sat." He said it the way people say things when they are not entirely comfortable saying them but have decided it would be worse not to. I was dismissive. That wasn't right. I thought about what to say. I thought about Margaret and what she would have done. One raised eyebrow, I was certain. "I remember," I said, simply. He held my look. "I imagine you do." I let it sit there for a moment more. Then I said, "I appreciate that, Stuart. Genuinely, and I meant it. Because the thing I have learned in 63 years of being alive and in 40 years of dealing with people across tables and in buildings and in empty car parks where decisions get made is that the apology a proud man gives unprompted is rarer and more costly than any rental check. It tells you more about who he is than all the watches and Range Rovers in the world." We shook hands at the roller door, properly this time. No performance in it. He signed the lease 6 days later. 5 years, the full term. Not a dollar negotiated off. Brendan and Rachel handled the paperwork. I was not there for the signing. I was at my desk in the Tauranga office I have kept for 30 years. Going through the plans for the Rotorua development. Rachel texted me when it was done. I put my phone face down on the desk and sat for a moment in the afternoon quiet. There is a particular kind of satisfaction that does not announce itself loudly. It does not require an audience. It is the satisfaction of a thing that has come full circle, not because you forced it there, but because you stayed patient long enough to let the circle close on its own. The month after the lease was signed, I was at a family dinner at Patricia's house in Hamilton, the kind of Sunday afternoon gathering that involves too many people talking at the same time and someone always burning the garlic bread. Daniel was there with Chloe. She was telling Patricia about the venue they had chosen for the wedding. There was a good feeling in the room. Stuart was there. He was Chloe's uncle, after all. He would be at these gatherings from time to time. That was simply the shape of things. He found me in the kitchen after the main course, while I was making tea. He stood at the bench beside me and said, without preamble, "I told my brother-in-law about you. He said he's known who you are for 20 years. I spooned the tea into the pot. "Jeffrey?" I said. Jeffrey was Chloe's father. We had done business at One Remove, years ago, through a mutual contact. He said, "You're one of the most respected commercial property people in the Bay of Plenty," Stuart said. He said he should have introduced us properly at the party. He said he assumed we'd already know each other. I poured the water. I watched the steam rise. "Jeffrey's generous," I said. Stuart was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I spent 30 years building something to be proud of. I got to a point where I thought that meant I could read people quickly, that I had earned the right to make fast judgments." He paused. I was wrong about that. I handed him a mug. He took it. "The best lesson I ever learned," I said. was from a man who employed me for 2 summers when I was 19. He ran a timber yard in Rotorua. Not a big operation. Nothing impressive to look at. He drove a 20-year-old ute and wore the same jacket every day of the year. And I thought I had him completely figured out in about 48 hours. I paused. Turned out he owned the land under 6 of the largest commercial properties in the city and had been quietly acquiring forestry rights for 15 years. He sold it all the following year and retired to the Coromandel. Stuart looked at me. He told me something I have never forgotten, I said. He said, "The loudest thing in the room is rarely the most important thing in the room." Stuart was quiet for a moment. Then something in his face shifted, not the performed respect I had seen at the building, but something more genuine, something a little uncomfortable, the way real things often are. "I'll remember that," he said. "Good," I said. "The tea's better if you don't let it sit too long." We went back to the table. Daniel caught my eye across the room and raised his glass in a small, private gesture, the kind between 2 people who do not need to explain it to anyone else. I raised mine back. Outside, the Hamilton afternoon was doing what Hamilton afternoons do in autumn gray gold. A bit of wind off the Waikato, the kind of light that makes everything look like it happened a long time ago and turned out fine. I thought about Margaret. I thought about the timber yard man in Rotorua. I thought about 37 years of buildings and leases and early mornings and decisions made without fanfare in rooms no one else was watching. I thought, this is what it looks like when you do the work, without needing anyone to see you do it. And then I finished my tea and helped Patricia with the dishes and drove home on the motorway in the dark, quietly, the way I do most things. There are things I know now that I wish I had understood earlier. I will pass them on in case they are useful to someone younger who is still working out the shape of things. The first is this. The way someone treats you when they believe you have nothing to offer them is the most honest information they will ever give you about who they are. Not their handshake at the beginning, not their smile when the deal is on the table the moment they decide you are beneath their attention. That is when you see them clearly. The second is this. Quiet work, done consistently over a long time, builds things that loud work rarely can. Not because silence is a strategy, but because when you are not performing for an audience, you are free to focus on what actually matters. The third is this. The measure of a person is not what they do when they are winning. It is what they do when they realize they were wrong. Stuart Vane apologized without being asked. That counted for something. It counted for more than he probably realized, and it is the reason I have no ill feeling toward him. A man who can say I was wrong without being cornered into it is a man who has done some of the harder work of being human. And the last thing, the one the timber yard man gave me when I was 19 and that I have carried every day since. The loudest thing in the room is rarely the most important thing in the room. Pay attention to the quiet ones. They have usually been paying attention to you for a long time. If this story stayed with you, please leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. And if you know someone who needs to hear something like this today, share it with them. Sometimes the right story finds you at exactly the right moment. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.